The fog hung low over the French fields, wrapping the morning in a dull gray silence. The Tiger tank crawled forward, its engine growling through the mist like a caged animal. Inside, 4 men sat in tense quiet. Oberfeldwebel Karl Neumann, the commander, kept his eyes on the narrow slit of vision ahead. His gunner, Weber, whispered a prayer under his breath, while the driver, Otto, tightened his grip on the controls. They had been moving for hours, hunting an enemy they could not see, only hear through distant gunfire and broken radio chatter. It was July 1944, and the world was closing in on them. The Tiger's metal tracks crushed the wet soil. Smoke from distant burning vehicles drifted over the hills. In that quiet ruin, they found it. An American Sherman, half sunk in mud, its crew gone, its turret twisted, but not destroyed. The Tiger stopped a few meters away. Weber muttered, "They must have run, left it whole." Karl climbed out, his boots sinking into the wet ground. The Sherman stood like a ghost of another world, simpler, thinner armor, rough paint, crude welding. Yet something about it felt alive. Karl ran his gloved hand along the side of the hull. Reading the stenciled letters USA 33-124, he stared at it for a long time, as if it were speaking to him in silence. Otto joined him, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "We build our tanks like cathedrals," he said softly. "They build theirs like tools?" Karl nodded, thinking. The Tiger was a masterpiece, yes, but a heavy one. Each one took months to make. Each loss hurt Germany like a knife in the ribs. This Sherman, by contrast, could be built in days, by the hundreds, perhaps thousands. It was not beautiful, but it worked. It kept coming, and that was the war. They opened the Sherman's hatch. Inside there were half-eaten rations, an English Bible, and a cigarette pack with a woman's face printed on it. Weber stared at it for a while, his jaw tight. "They even have time to print pretty faces on their cigarettes," he said. "We barely get tobacco." Karl said nothing. He only looked at the smooth gears, the practical layout, the rough but efficient machine before him. It was not about who had the stronger armor anymore. It was about who could build faster, replace faster, move faster. From the distance came the sound of approaching engines. Another Allied column, perhaps. Karl gave a quiet order, and the crew climbed back into the Tiger. As Otto started the engine, Karl glanced one last time at the Sherman. The fog swallowed it again. For the first time, he felt something heavier than fear, understanding. The Tiger rumbled away through the mist, but in his mind, a single truth echoed. The real war was no longer fought with steel and shells. It was fought in the factories, and Germany was already losing. The Tiger rolled through a shattered village where walls leaned like broken bones and church bells hung silent. Smoke rose from chimneys of collapsed houses, and the air smelled of oil, ash, and something faintly sweet, burned wheat from a nearby field. The crew said little. Karl's thoughts drifted between the captured Sherman and the rumors spreading across every German radio wave. Reports spoke of Allied tanks landing in endless numbers, of bombers striking factories deep inside the Reich. Each time the radio crackled, the voice on the other end sounded more uncertain, more forced, as if the truth itself were choking on static. Weber finally broke the silence. "Herr Feldwebel, do you think we can still win?" His voice was careful, almost shy. Karl stared through the vision slit. "Wars are not won by who fights the hardest, Weber. They are won by who can afford to keep fighting." Otto snorted quietly, his face gray with exhaustion. "Then we are finished." No one corrected him. The Tiger's engine was the only sound, growling through the ruins like a dying animal. They halted near a burned-out barn to rest. The crew climbed down, stretching stiff legs. Lieutenant Franz, the radio operator, took out his small notebook. He liked to count the tanks they had seen destroyed, both theirs and the enemy's. He scribbled a few numbers, then stopped. "2 of ours lost for every one of theirs," he murmured. "And they still come." Karl leaned against the tank, lighting a cigarette. "Do you remember last winter?" he asked. "They told us our new Tigers would turn the tide. They said no Allied tank could face us." Weber looked up. "And it was true." Karl nodded slowly. "But they built 10 Shermans for every Tiger we made. 10 for one." From the road, a group of refugees passed by, women, children, an old man dragging a cart. They stared at the tiger with hollow eyes. One woman paused, her child clinging to her hand. "Will it end soon?" she asked softly. Karl wanted to answer, but the words would not come. He only nodded once, and she moved on. The sound of their footsteps faded into the wind. That night, they made camp beside the wreckage of a downed fighter plane. Its aluminum skin was scorched, its markings barely visible. Franz walked around it, studying the design. "American," he said. "Look at the metalwork. Light, simple, fast. They do not overbuild." Karl ran his hand over the frame. "They have no time for perfection, only production." He thought of the Sherman again, the same logic, the same invisible hand guiding their war effort. As the night deepened, they huddled by the Tiger's warm engine, listening to distant artillery. Somewhere far away, factories roared like monsters in the dark, pouring out tanks, trucks, planes, and rifles in endless rhythm. Karl could almost hear the heartbeat of that machinery echoing through the earth. In the glow of the fading fire, he whispered, "They fight with factories. We fight with pride, and pride does not build tanks." No one answered. The war was moving without them now, like a river they could no longer swim against. Dawn broke with a pale light over the French countryside, dim and uncertain. The Tiger sat motionless on the edge of a hill, its long gun barrel pointed toward a road that twisted through the mist. Karl stood outside, helmet off, his breath visible in the cold air. He had not slept. The others stirred quietly around the tank, their faces pale in the morning haze. Weber brewed coffee on a small burner, the smell sharp against the damp wind. Otto cleaned his tools without speaking, while Franz tuned the radio, catching fragments of a distant German transmission. The voice spoke of regrouping, of counterattacks, of a victory that felt more like a prayer than a report. Karl looked down the road and saw movement, 2 Shermans moving cautiously between the trees. The crew scrambled into position. The Tiger's engine roared to life, shaking the ground. Weber adjusted the optics. "Range 800 meters, he said. Karl gave a single nod. The first shell fired with a thunderclap, slicing through the fog and striking the lead Sherman. It burst into flames, black smoke curling upward. The second tank reversed, its gun turning wildly, firing back in panic. The shell struck near the Tiger's tracks, spraying dirt and stone. Weber fired again. The second Sherman stopped moving. Silence returned, thick and heavy. Weber exhaled sharply. "2 more," he muttered. Otto grinned, but the expression faded almost instantly. There was no joy left in victories like this. Karl stared at the burning wrecks. He had seen this sight 100 times, yet something about it felt hollow now. They could destroy every Sherman in France, and it would not matter. For every one they burned, another 10 would cross the Channel tomorrow. The thought lingered like smoke in his chest. Franz's radio crackled again, faint under the static. Reports of Allied armor advancing east of Caen, hundreds of vehicles, multiple supply lines. Karl leaned closer, listening. The voice continued, "Factories in Essen and Hamburg bombed again. Heavy losses." Franz lowered the receiver slowly. No one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the Tiger's engine, cooling in the morning air. Later, they moved down to inspect the wrecks. The first Sherman's armor was thin but scorched evenly, its interior gutted by fire. Karl noticed something curious, the spare parts stowed neatly, tools labeled, everything simple and replaceable. He looked at the melted gearbox, the burned seats, the modular joints. Even destruction could not hide the design. He turned to Weber. "They make war like they make bread, enough for everyone." They salvaged what little they could, ammunition, fuel cans, rations. Inside one of the Shermans, Franz found a small photo of a young woman and a letter folded neatly beside it. He handed it to Karl. The letter was written in English, but Karl could read enough to understand. A wife thanking her husband for writing. Home saying she hoped the war would end soon so he could come back and fix cars again. Karl folded it carefully, tucking it into his pocket. "He wanted to fix engines," he said quietly. "So do we all." They returned to the Tiger, the fog now burning away under a weak sun. The horizon shimmered with distant explosions. The crew climbed back inside, the air thick with the smell of oil and burned metal. Karl gave the order to move. As the Tiger rumbled forward, he looked once more at the wrecked Shermans behind them. They were symbols now, not enemies, reminders of a war being won not on the field, but in the endless hum of assembly lines far from the front. The realization sat heavy in his chest, deeper than fear, colder than defeat. Rain fell that night, soft but endless, drumming on the Tiger's thick armor like a heartbeat that refused to stop. The crew had taken shelter in a deserted farmhouse on the edge of a ruined orchard. The roof leaked in slow, steady drops, and the wind carried the distant sound of artillery from the west. The war was closing in like a tightening fist. Karl sat by the window, looking out at the dark shapes of the fields, now soaked and glistening under the weak light of the moon. The smell of damp earth mixed with diesel and cold iron. Inside, Weber slept in his corner, twitching in uneasy dreams, while Otto cleaned his pistol with mechanical precision, a ritual more than a necessity. Franz sat near the radio, listening to faint voices that faded in and out of static. The message came just before midnight. The front at St. Lo had broken. Allied armor was advancing in waves, and German lines were collapsing under the weight. Franz looked up, his eyes tired and hollow. "They say the Americans have more tanks than we have bullets," he said softly. Karl did not answer. He simply reached for his map, spreading it on the table. The paper was damp, the ink smudged. He traced the lines with his finger, seeing not just positions, but destinies. Factories in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Birmingham, pouring out tanks faster than the Reich could destroy them. For every Tiger built, another factory somewhere in America had already prepared the next 100 Shermans. He closed the map slowly. "This is how they win," he said. "Not here, not with guns, but there, where smoke rises from the chimneys and hands never stop working." Otto looked up. "We build one masterpiece," he said bitterly. "They build 1,000 tools." Karl nodded. "And both kill just the same." Morning came gray and wet. They prepared to move again, orders coming from a command that sounded more desperate with each transmission. The Tiger groaned to life, its engine coughing before settling into a steady growl. As they rolled through the flooded fields, they passed the wreckage of another German column, burned trucks, abandoned guns, and soldiers walking barefoot in the mud. No one saluted any more. They just stared as the Tiger passed, like men watching a ghost that did not yet know it was dead. They stopped near a ridge to refuel. The wind carried the scent of gasoline and rain. Karl stepped out, stretching his legs. In the valley below, he saw smoke, black columns rising from a distant town. "Factories," Franz murmured, joining him. "Ours or theirs?" Karl did not answer. He thought of the Sherman they had captured days ago, of the letter from the wife, of the photo of a man who just wanted to fix cars. Perhaps somewhere far away, another man stood in another field, thinking the same thing. A sudden roar echoed from the distance. Allied planes swept overhead low and fast, their engines tearing the sky. The crew scrambled for cover as bombs fell far away, the ground trembling beneath their boots. When the sound faded, Karl looked up at the clouds. "This is the sound of the factory," he said. "It has found us." The others said nothing. That evening, they parked the Tiger beneath a grove of trees. The radio was silent now, the battery nearly dead. The rain returned, heavier than before. Karl lit a final cigarette, watching the smoke curl upward. "When this ends," he said quietly, "no one will remember the Tigers or the Shermans. They will remember who could build faster, who could dream bigger." Otto looked at him, confused. "And us?" Karl smiled faintly. "We were only the hands that turned the gears." The night swallowed his words. The Tiger's engine cooled for the last time, steam rising into the cold air. Far away, the factories still roared, unseen, but victorious. The real war had already been won, long before the last shot was fired.